Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Strike! The 80-20 Coaching Masterclass. Our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome, youth baseball community. Pumped up to be here this week with all of you. Baseball season in full swing for many of us. Let's talk baseball. Let's talk coaching. Let's talk about where we can get better and go out there with confidence, knowing our strategies, our methods are not only going to work, they are going to work consistently. We got a quick hitter this week. The plan had been to bring you another interview, but that interview got pushed back. But we got some key stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about Dan Hurley, well-known college basketball coach. I've talked about his dad on this podcast, Bob Hurley Sr., a great coach. And I mentioned Dan Hurley a few years ago, briefly, during March Madness. I was watching Coach Hurley, and this is something we can learn as coaches and something I definitely wouldn't recommend doing ourselves. That is the emotional up and downs that I see from Coach Hurley. Now, I don't know him personally, and I know on the scoreboard he has had a good amount of success, but I do see a red flag when I see the emotions going up and down and I don't see an even keel coach. I think of another basketball coach who's one of the most famous basketball coaches of all time, Phil Jackson, the Zen master. And for those of you that have been longtime listeners, Coach Jackson was a big reason I got into coaching and definitely influenced the way I coach today. They called him the Zen master, of course, but really it was his even keel approach, his even keel manner. That doesn't mean he didn't raise his voice from time to time. That doesn't mean he wasn't firm. That doesn't mean he didn't have rules and expectations. He, of course, did, but he was even keel. And when I watched Coach Hurley, Dan Hurley, over the past few months, I saw a red flag. Now, I bring him up even though he's not a youth coach. There are those of you that have seen him on TV, and you can go check out YouTube video of him. And it's a big red flag when I see a coach that's not even keel. And one of the hardest things to do as a coach is to temper our emotions and stay even keel. Sports by nature can be very emotional. It can be very up and down. And this is something that coaches have to be aware of, cognizant of, in order to be at our best, in order to get the most out of our players, in order to set the best example for our players. Emotional players, players that are up and down, riding an emotional roller coaster, they're not going to play their best. And players feed off coaches. And in life, in our world today, we need more of our kids, this next generation, to grow up with an even keel mindset. And so I saw this a while back and I made note of it. I saw Coach Hurley losing his cool, letting his emotions get the best of him. He was talking to the crowd, the fans of opponents, of other teams as he's walking off the court. I believe it was the Creighton game. He even pointed to his hand showing the fans, hey, championship ring, and then held up the number 2. We got 2 of them. You're a college coach or you're a coach at any level. You don't need to be mixing it up and taunting the fans or telling them how many championships you've won. I want to point this out because there was that. And then I think it was actually more than a few months ago. I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago at the Maui Invitational. He blew a gasket on a referee. There's no reason for this. Even at his level, when he's making millions of dollars a year, there's no reason to blow a gasket and start yelling at somebody. If you wouldn't do it at the grocery store to the clerk, if you wouldn't do it at a doctor's office, there's no reason to be yelling at the refs with this just emotional outburst. There's no reason to be taunting the fans. Now, for youth baseball, the fans aren't as big a thing as college basketball, but there are the umpires. Let's not yell at the umpires. In fact, there's no reason ever to yell at an umpire, ever. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go discuss a call that they might have missed insofar as it's something that could be overturned and corrected. Most of the time it's not, but there's no reason to be blowing a gasket toward anybody on the baseball field, nor should we ever be talking with, taunting the opponent's fans, albeit there may only be a few at a youth baseball game. We got to keep our cool, stay even keel. That's my message. If you need to, if you're one of those coaches that gets fired up, go for a 20-minute jog before the game. Say you know you need to leave for your game at 1:30, put it on your calendar for 1 o'clock to go for a 20-minute jog. Come back, get a drink of water, get the kids, head to the game. So I had this discussion on the back burner for the last, but I wanted to touch on this Dan Hurley, who's a well-known coach out there. In fact, I heard that he might be be taking an MBA job. But that aside, it's a good example, a very well-known example of what not to do when it comes to not being even keel. It's super important to stay even keel, and it's not easy. Games, sports, athletics, it gets emotional. That's part of the joy, part of the fun of the games, of the competitions. And we shouldn't remove all of that. I think it's important that we adjust our response. One of the things I like to do is sit in a relaxed position in the dugout. And by being in that relaxed position, it takes an extra step to raise up the intensity. And if anything, save your energy for practice, not to yell at players, but save that energy, one, for your health and your immune system, and two, for practices. Save that extra energy. Don't use it on the ref, the fans. Stay even keel during the games and use that energy and bottle it up and use it to put on a better practice, a more productive, high energy practice. All right, so be even keel. Having emotions are good. They just can't be the thing leading us. Our emotions can be motivators. They just can't be the drivers. Now, moving to topic number 2 of 3, see the person, not just the behavior. This is really, really important. And this was pivotal in how I became a much better teacher and coach. Separate the behavior from the person. This is tough to do because it's reasonable to say what we do is the person we are. And in many ways, that's true. But when kids are acting a fool or kids misbehave, it's important to see behind the behavior, see the person, see what's happened to that kid that led them to act out that behavior. I got this from JP Nurbin's newsletter a few weeks back. He, of course, was on this podcast before. He's written 3 really good books on team culture, and he sent out a newsletter a few weeks ago. If you don't subscribe to his newsletter, I recommend it. It's called TOC Culture. TOC Culture. It's a weekly newsletter that can be found on tocculture.com. And I won't read the entire newsletter that he sent out, but it starts off by saying, underneath the selfish attitude, the poor effort, and the lack of discipline, there's always a good person, especially when it comes to kids. Behind the bad behavior, typically there's a kid that needs us more, at least at that time, more than the other kids, the other players. And this was a huge leap in my career. And I think this is something that a lot of coaches and teachers, they don't ever get to this level because you have to not only separate the behavior from the kid, you have to do it quickly. And then you got to follow it up with figuring out why that behavior is coming about from that kid. Get to the root. The behavior is a symptom. Behaviors are symptoms. What's the root cause? Get to that. Fix that. Address the root cause. The behavior is a symptom. The first thing is we see the behavior. It gets our blood boiling a little. It gets us a little tense. Gets us a little angry as coaches. We have to first be aware of that. We need to stay even keel. Then we need to quickly say, that's the behavior. What's causing that behavior? What's going on in this kid's life? Or what is the reason behind this behavior? They got a bad home life? Now, while we as coaches can't fix that, we should definitely use that to calm our approach and to motivate us to approach the player and the situation with empathy and sympathy. It's hard to get mad at a kid when you realize the behavior is just a symptom of something typically out of their control, especially the younger kids, 10 years old, 9 years old, 8 years old, 12 years old. These are kids. So by seeing the person, not just the behavior, from there we can have empathy and sympathy and at the end of the day, solve the issue or at least get to the root cause and work to solve that so we can have a better team culture, better practices, better games, better results. So when kids are acting a fool, it's a symptom. With that said, some of you are probably thinking, and justifiably so, hey, Coach Bo, I can't just let that behavior go, right? No, of course not. We have rules and consequences for those behaviors, and we should have a firm set of rules and consequences. I think warnings are appropriate, but at the end of the day, the rules and expectations, the standards should be clear, and those should be upheld in order to create a productive, enjoyable, safe environment for all the players, all the kids, everybody involved. But the two can coexist. You can have rules, you can have high standards, and as coaches, we can also see the person, not just the behavior. So yes, we address the behavior with the standards, expectations, and rules and consequences. But from a person-to-person approach, then we go and we try to figure out what's going on. Why is it like this? Why are they like that? Look beyond the behavior. And it goes on to say in the newsletter, start by treating them as someone who is good and wants to be good. Speak to the belief of who they can be and will be someday. This is a huge step, a huge leap. Maybe one of the biggest leaps when it comes to being a coach, a teacher, definitely a teacher, and even a parent, making that leap to where we have the perspective, the paradigm that when we see a behavior, we can detach the behavior from the kid and thus allowing us to approach it in the best way. All right, speaking of kid, years ago, I saw a kid. He was a sophomore at the time, Matt McLean. Now he plays for the Reds. And he played on a team in Tustin in the league I was coaching in. And I was scouting all the hitters for all the teams. So I knew all the hitters in our league inside and out. I knew their swing, their approach inside and out, slow motion from the side, from behind. I could tell you all their weaknesses, their holes. And I remember playing Matt McLean's team. Now, Matt McLean is now with the Cincinnati Reds, and he's doing well, but he's very undersized for a major league player. And he was undersized for a high school kid. You can go look it up. Matt McLean went to UCLA after he played at Beckman High School in Tustin. And when we played him, he was a sophomore. And Beckman is a really good program, very respected program in Southern California, in Orange County. And I remember scouting all their players. And I remember our coaching staff and other coaches talking about all these other players that they had. And I thought, this guy hitting in the 2 slot, and I believe his number was number 2 actually at the time. This guy hitting in the 2 slot, Matt McLean, he's their best hitter. And it wasn't because he could hit the ball the furthest, and it wasn't because he was the biggest. He definitely wasn't. He had the best approach. He had the best hitting approach. He swung at the highest percentage of hitters' pitches with less than 2 strikes, and he chased the fewest amount of pitches that were outside of the strike zone. And he also would take pitchers' pitches. If our pitcher put one on the outside corner at the knees for strike 1, he didn't swing at it. He knew that wasn't his pitch to swing at. He had the best approach, and his hard work, his approach as a hitter is a huge reason he's had the success, and now he's in the major leagues. A 2-time first-round draft pick. Go check it out. He's listed at 5'9", 180. He's listed at 5'9", 180. So he's likely 5'8 and a half, 175. For a major league ball player, I saw him playing in a major league game recently on TV, and I thought, man, I remember when he was a sophomore in high school, and his approach was so much better than everybody else's. And now he's a 5'9", buck 80 on a good day in the major leagues. Hitting approach, everyone. Swing at the right pitches, take the right pitches, look to hit doubles in the gaps, hard line drives. There really is only one true commonality amongst all the great hitters in baseball. In the history of the game, past and present. There are different swings. Players start their swings at different times, their rhythm. Some have a slight uppercut. Some are more straight. Some are a little downward. Some start with their hands high. Some start low. They use different types of bats. Some are open stances. Some are closed stances. Most hitters are all the way back in the box, but some hitters move up a little bit. Some crowd the plate. Some stand off the plate. The single commonality that all the great players, all the great hitters have shared is pitch selection. We call it having a good eye, swinging at the right pitches. And this was 10 plus years ago, seeing Matt McLean as a sophomore in high school, well before anybody really knew who he was. I'm sure some colleges had him on their radar at the time, and a few scouts had him on their radar, but he was 5'8". 5'7 and a half. In fact, he might have been the smallest hitter in their entire lineup. It was a high school lineup, but he had the best approach. Now, I don't want to take away from his swing and his athleticism, but swinging at the right pitches. So it got me thinking about the plan A and plan 2 hitting approach, seeing Matt McLean in the big leagues this year. Saw him hit a home run. Now, he may never be a star player in the major leagues, but the guy's in the major leagues. He's a major league baseball player. 5'9", a buck 80, listed. I mean, he's already got 19 big league home runs. All right. The 80-20 baseball coaching plan will be launching very soon. You'll be the first to know about it. Really excited about getting this out there for all of you. I'll let you know on this podcast, and any of you that follow me on X and Instagram, although I'm not on there a lot, but I'll start posting this stuff on there, and Facebook. Definitely here on this podcast, I will announce that when it launches here very shortly. Excited. This has been years in the making, and it's going to be really helpful for every coach, no matter if you're a beginner or an experienced coach. So to recap today's episode, let's be even keel. Let's be even keel out there when we're coaching. More Phil Jackson, less Dan Hurley. Emotions are good, but they can't be the leader. Starts with awareness. The second thing we covered was when player misbehaves or kids misbehave, it's important to quickly separate the behavior from the kid. And like J.P. Nurbin, who was on this podcast a while back, author of books specifically about team culture, said in his recent newsletter, let's give kids the benefit of the doubt. Let's believe that they want to do good, that they're kids that want to do well, and that the behaviors are symptoms of something else. Get to the root, come with empathy, come with sympathy, while at the same time making sure that we do uphold team standards, team expectations too, right? We also want to make sure that the team culture is protected and solidified. But let's see the person, let's see the kid, not just the behavior, and let's try to separate those two too. You got to trust me on this. This is a huge differentiator for teachers, coaches, parents. One, let's expect kids to mess up a little. Let's expect some poor behavior. We shouldn't expect them to be perfect angels. They're kids. They're trying to figure out the world. And a lot of kids come from situations that aren't that great. And a lot of times we don't see that. We're not privy to it. But let's give the kids the benefit of the doubt that they want to be good and work from there. And then 3, Matt McClain playing for the Reds, shortstop, number 9, probably shorter than the average shortstop in your local area's varsity league. The best way to support the podcast is leave a positive review. It doesn't take more than a few minutes, and it really helps. It moves the podcast up to reach more coaches around the country and even outside of the country. We got about 6% of our listeners are outside of the United States, which is really cool. On next week's episode, we're going to talk about being on the same page as a coaching staff when it comes to handling and coaching individual players with regard to specific skills. We'll also talk about Bobby Witt Jr.'s reset process, something he does while he's hitting when he needs to reset so he can get himself back on track, get the at-bat back on track. In fact, this is something that my teammates were taught back when I was in college at Long Beach State by Dr. Ken Revisa, one of the godfathers of the mental game of baseball and sports. He had the hitters doing this. We'll talk about that reset process that Bobby Witt Jr. uses and how we can use it with our players and how we can implement it and get our players to use it. And I'm hoping to have at least part 1 of the interview. So I'm hoping that gets rescheduled before next week's episode and I can bring at least part 1 to all of you. If not, we got some good stuff to cover and we'll go from there. All right, everyone, be proud of yourself for being a coach. And until next week, let's take care of our health so we can be at our best for our families, our close friends, and so we can be the best coach we can be. All right, let's take this information. Let's take it out to the field and put it into play. Y'all take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.